Hi, my name is Lynton and this is Sketch and Tell. We are thinking about Reconciliation Week and I'm going to do a painting and tell a story. Even though it might seem a little unrelated to the theme, please come with me on the journey and towards the end we'll make some connections. Now, even though I live in Victoria, I used to live in Queensland at a place called Burleigh Heads, which is just south of the Gold Coast. And there's a big headland there and it's really good for surfing. And I want to tell you about something that happened one weekend that was amazing. Early on Saturday morning, a number of the young surfing guys were out catching some of the good waves, because that's when it's really good to catch them, early in the morning. But suddenly a shark appeared and attacked one of those young board riders. Now fortunately, he was able to hold on to his surfboard after the shark took a bite out of it. But he could see the shark was still circling and he was really afraid of what was going to happen next. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a whole pod of dolphins appeared and started to swim around and around his board and himself holding on. And at first he was wondering what is going on, and then he realised that the dolphins on the outside of that circle were peeling off and they were attacking the shark using their noses or their snouts. The other dolphins, as they kept swimming around him, were shepherding him or guiding him back towards the beach. And that's where he arrived safely. And that story kind of went all over the media and everybody was going, wow, what an amazing thing to happen. And I was one of those. I've always been interested in dolphins, but this took it to another level. And then I started thinking to myself, I wonder if this has happened elsewhere. Or has this been a one-off thing that's happened at Burleigh? And when you get an interest in something, it's good to follow that interest and see where it takes you. And over the years, I have found that there are hundreds and hundreds of other stories, usually called dolphin encounters. And they come from all around the world and they stretch back nearly 2,000 years. And even though they involve different people in different places, there's a common thread, and that is that somebody is in trouble in the water and out of nowhere comes a pod of dolphins or sometimes a single dolphin and helps that person. Let me share some of my favourite stories with you as I add a bit more colour to this painting. Is there anybody from New Zealand? Because if you are, you have two very famous dolphins. The first is called Opo. And little Opo became famous because during a violent thunderstorm, a professional fisherman who was on a trawler was washed off overboard. And he was not able to swim. And he was losing strength, becoming very weak, and he was drowning. Until this little dolphin appeared and came underneath him and lifted him up on his back and allowed him to hold on. And allowed him to keep holding on until another trawler came and eventually rescued him. Now they think that that little dolphin was probably separated from its own pod during the storm because it stayed in that area and was affectionately called Opo. The other dolphin, we are now going back nearly, over 100 years, and it happened down on the South Island. And this dolphin's name was Pelorus Jack. And for 24 years, so that's a long time for this to happen, but for 24 years, this little dolphin would go out and greet ships that were coming in to the harbour of Pelorus. But there was a dangerous passageway to get into the harbour, and that little dolphin would guide the ships through that channel into the safety of Pelorus harbour. And that dolphin, again, was affectionately called Pelorus Jack. Now, we also have some interesting stories back here in Australia, and I'd like to share one of my favourites, and it happened to a young girl down in South Australia, or across in South Australia. And she was with her family, and they were enjoying a fishing trip out in a small open boat out in the deeper part of the waters off the peninsula there, when they were caught unexpectedly in a storm that developed very quickly, and the boat overturned, capsized, and everybody was thrown out in the water, including that young girl. Now, I'm glad to say that she still had her life jacket on and she was able to keep afloat, but as she looked around, she could see that the boat she had been in was being swept away from her, and she couldn't see her family. But she thought, maybe if I try and paddle towards the beach, I might be able to make it by myself. But as she looked around, she realised she had lost her sense of direction. She couldn't see the beach, and the waves were towering above her, and it was very dark as the storm continued. And she started to panic and think, which way should I start swimming? Am I going to go back out into the deeper part of the bay if I go that way, or should I go this way? And right at that point, she felt something touch her legs in the water, and she looked down and she saw some shapes of some very large sea creatures swimming around her and under her, and she was thinking at first that this could be sharks coming up or sea monsters coming to grab her. But when she looked again, she saw that the shapes were that of dolphins. And she was again surrounded by a pod of dolphins, who this time were not only swimming under her and around her, but came around behind her, and using their noses, they started to gently push her and nudge her in a certain direction. And she just had a feeling deep down that these dolphins were trying to push her and guide her back to the beach that she couldn't see. And so she decided to take a risk and to trust those dolphins and to start swimming in that direction. And as she swam, the dolphins stayed with her. They kept pushing and nudging her until she reached the beach. There's another story which I will share with you, as I just keep adding a little bit more colour here. And that is of the youngest woman who rowed single-handedly across the Atlantic Ocean. Her name was Katie Spots, and it took her about 70 days to do it without any assistance. But when she had finished, she was being interviewed by the media, and they were asking her lots of questions. Everybody was interested. But one of the questions they asked her, which was quite okay, and that was, which part of the journey did you find the hardest? And I expect they probably thought that she was going to say it was the physical rowing, but she said, well, actually, I had trained for that. And even though it was tough, you get into a rhythm. You row for 2 hours, you rest for 2 hours, and you just get into that rhythm and you keep it up. She said the biggest challenge was her mental attitude. She said about halfway across, she got really down. She got very depressed. She was feeling very alone. And she said, I almost felt like giving up. But she said on that day, and that day only, so that's the only day out of the 70 days, she said to her amazement, her boat was surrounded by a pod of dolphins who swam under and around, and they stayed with her for the whole day. And they were so close, she was able to reach out and she was able to touch them and make a connection with them. And she said that connection and their presence just lifted her spirits and gave her more of a sense of a positive attitude, and she said, I then was able to continue. There is just one more which takes me back to the Gold Coast. And for, again, anyone who's been there, you'll know that we have a lot of really nice theme parks on the coast. And one of those is called SeaWorld. Now, I don't know if they still do it, but when I was there, at SeaWorld, there were some afternoons when all the tourists had gone and the gates were shut. They would allow certain people in And these were people who were very, very sick, or people who were very, very depressed or feeling very sad. And they would take them in and let them swim around in the pool with some of the dolphins. And they said that the dolphins didn't have any magical healing powers, but it did make a difference. And the dolphins seemed to sense that these people needed some kind of special help, and they would just swim up to them and let them touch them and pat them and just be with them. And just having that connection, they said, really changed a lot of those, particularly young people, when they were feeling really sad, or even though they were still sick, they had a lot more energy and a lot more courage to face what it was they were facing. So as I was finding out about these dolphin encounters, I then started to think to myself, why do dolphins do this? I mean, these were not dolphins from SeaWorld. Most of the other stories that I've told you about, they weren't trained to reach out and help people. They just seem to do it on their own. And when you think about it, in nature, most animals have learned over time that they should keep away from us humans because we're not always kind to them. We aren't always kind of very good friends, and so they stay away from us. It's kind of instinctive to them. But dolphins seem to go the other way. Now, it doesn't happen always, so please don't go down to St Kilda Pier and throw yourself off the end and hope that a dolphin's going to come and rescue you. It doesn't work like that. But it does happen enough for scientists to take an interest. And they have been studying dolphins and have been trying to work out, why do dolphins seem to go the other way and make that connection with you and I, particularly when we're in trouble in the water. And they've come up with a number of interesting theories or thoughts, and you might already be thinking about what these might be, but let me just share a couple of them. Of course, they know that dolphins are not fish. They don't have gills and they don't breathe under the water like fish do. Even though they live under the water, they are like us. They breathe air like us. They're warm-blooded. They're mammals. They live in two worlds. And they also know that dolphins are very, very smart. Their brain is nearly as big as ours. They also know that dolphins very rarely do anything on their own, unless they've been separated. They are what we call a communal animal. They love to stay together in a family group called a pod. And they do everything together. We have studied dolphins hunting together and playing together, and even when a small dolphin is born under the water, it's got to take its first breath upstairs, so some of the other dolphins come underneath and they lift it up on their backs so it can take its first breath. There are many occasions where dolphins have been known to protect each other, and if one dolphin gets sick, they don't abandon it, they stay with it. They will slow down and stay with that sick dolphin. And if one dolphin dies, again they carry it around on their backs for a few days until they let it go. It's almost like there is a grieving taking place. And so there is this thought that maybe dolphins, because they're kind of like us and they're very smart, they are reaching out and extending that family connection and including us. And look, there might be some truth in these theories, and there's probably a lot more. There is a lot more that we need to understand. But in the end, everything that I've read says that we still don't know. It's a mystery. But nonetheless, I thought that I would paint this picture, and I'll just keep adding a little bit more to it and tell you about these dolphins, because as an artist and a storyteller, I look at this in another way. Yes, I love dolphins and I love dolphin encounters, but to me this is a picture. It's what we call a symbol It's a way of thinking about reconciliation. Reconciliation is reaching out to someone who is not part of your family, not part of your friendship group. It's reaching out to someone who's different than you. It's reaching out to include them. And that might take a whole lot of different actions. I'll just go back and underline some of the ones that dolphins have been known to do. Reaching out to someone to reconcile with someone is to protect them, perhaps from what other people are saying or doing. It's to lift them up, to encourage them, again, with what we say and do. It's to maybe offer some guidance and help. To reach out to someone is to include them as part of your friendship group, and it's to heal them when you can. It's to mend a broken relationship. It's to make friends, even with someone who's unfriendly or someone who's different than you. And so to me, these dolphins provide, first of all, a picture or a way of thinking about those many people in our community who are doing that day in and day out. We take this week to think about them, but we also want to thank them and to be inspired by them. This picture is also a way for me to think about God, because God is the one who is always reaching out to us, who is always wanting to heal and mend and bring back together again a friendship that is broken. And there's forgiveness and there's restoration in all of that. And the best way to see that is in the person of Jesus, who came to show us that that is at the heart of who God is, constantly wanting to reconcile or be our friend, even though we might not want that initially. God never stops reaching out. But my last thought, as I add just a little bit more to this painting, is, of course, Reconciliation Week is to think about not just those people who are like dolphins in our community, not just about God, who's also reaching out to us, but also maybe it's something we can do. There's a theme for this week, and it's we are in this together, and we all play a part. And it's looking out for those who are lonely, who don't feel they're part of your group, who might feel they don't fit. It might even be noticing someone who has messed up and is feeling like, they are not liked by anyone. We can be like one of these dolphins by reaching out to them and being a friend to them. I'm going to add just a few more colours to this, but as I do this, think about Reconciliation Week, think about your part, my part in this, and have a colourful day.